What's up, everybody? Episode 51, Blake&VishSports. Sports. One day after the NFL season, a lot to discuss. A lot has happened.
Mhm.
Obviously, we're going to be, if you saw my tweet, I tweeted out, we're going to be talking 49ers. We're going to be talking Packers. We're going to be talking rookie quarterback debuts. We're going to be talking Joe Burrow. There's also one more
Mm.
topic I wanted to add in that I just realized we do need to talk about, Blake.
Mm.
Um, we got to talk about Matthew Stafford and what the Rams did last night.
Yeah.
So I'll add that in right now. But what's up otherwise? How's the um how was it watching the first week day of the NFL season? How was
Mm.
seeing the football?
I mean, so I only really watched the 325 games live, and I mean, the Packers game obviously went downhill really fast. So I was personally more interested in the Patriots game, and then the Chiefs and Browns game, which was just fantastic as well. Just I think that the Chiefs Browns rivalry is really good, and then the Chiefs Ravens rivalry is also really good, where the Chiefs just barely beat them each time, but you can tell how close the teams are. So that's kind of my that's how my game day went. I know yours was probably a little better as Jimmy G was just looking like 20. It was looking like 2019 all over again with Jimmy G just looking great.
He looked sharp. He did look real good actually. Um I mean, yeah, we'll get to talk about it. Pino already wants to hear you talk about the Packers. That was pretty ugly. That was disgusting.
Yeah, that was less than ideal, I think is the term.
A little bit less than ideal.
Hey, we saw Jordan Love though completed multiple passes. That was
In an
probably the
NFL
highlight.
game. Jordan Love is real, right? I was starting to think maybe they drafted him, but we won't ever
He's
see
a
him.
pigment of our
But
imagination, maybe.
yeah, but like just to go back before we start the show, we will be streaming at this time, around this time. I know the Monday night football game kind of goes on right now. Maybe we'll find a way to work around
We
it.
might
Maybe
have to
stream a
get
little
it
bit
earlier or
before.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, or a little bit after, but Mondays, Fridays, tune in. That's going to be our streaming schedule. Fridays will be kind of a Q&A, a recap of what happened in the week and stuff like that. And then obviously Mondays will be just analysis of what happened in Sunday's game. I mean, I watched 11 games on Sunday. I think
Mm.
was watching 5 simultaneously at one point, but, like, I was able to drop off a couple games because once they got uninteresting, I would just be able to drop one off. Alright, I
Yeah,
kinda
like the
got the
Packers
gist.
and Saints. You kinda drop that
Packers
off
and
at the
Saints, I dropped
prime. You don't
early.
have to worry about.
Broncos, Giants, I dropped early, so then that window, I'm just watching Browns and Chiefs, and then I'm watching, obviously, uh, the Mac Jones, the Alabama quarterback pool, Mac Jones and Tua
Yeah.
Tagovailoa, so that was all good, but I'm excited. There was a lot that happened. There's a lot of places we can start, but I do want to start with one of the rookie quarterbacks who made his debut, and that's a guy, Blake, I know who you really like. I like him too, but you really, really like him,
Probably
and
like him
that's
more than
Zach
me, yeah.
Wilson, who made his debut against the Carolina Panthers. You know, the Sam Darnold revenge game. He probably felt good getting revenge. The Jets obviously lost that game, but I thought Zach Wilson did a lot of good things. So, what were your thoughts on his debut?
Yeah, so I'd say out of all the rookie quarterbacks, he definitely dealt with just I mean, there was only 3 that played, right? But the O-line play was just atrocious. Mekhi Becton got injured, Elijah Vera Tucker's first game, and the Panthers' edge rushers were just living in the backfield. Brian Burns, Reddick, they were back there the whole time. It really just felt like Zach Wilson was running half the time. And sometimes that got him into some trouble where he would try to juke out 2 dudes and then get sacked or just not be able to get past the first guy. And then other times it would lead to greatness where he had that long touchdown pass to Corey Davis on the run after kind of evading a guy or two. So I thought the O line was just brutal and a lot worse than the Patriots and the Jaguars games from what I saw. Second off, I thought he started off obviously a little rough. Wasn't really, I don't know. There was a few drops, taking sacks, had a few errant throws, but I thought after that he really settled in, had a few strikes. Braxton Berrios on like 4th and long, and then I thought the throw of the game for him was that throw to Denzel Mims, climbed the pocket. It was like 40 yards on a rope. It was an absolute missile. And I thought that was probably his best play of the game. And I just thought, just overall, he had a good performance in my mind. I know statistically less than 50%, but with what he was given and what he was working with, I don't really know how much more you could have asked from him. But I thought he was solid overall, and definitely his arm, it just looked a little different, obviously, than preseason because the guys are a lot faster. But the drop off at first seemed a lot, and then after he settled in, I thought he really did fine, getting the ball where it needed to go and on time.
So I'm with you. I think the stats, especially if you box score scout that game, you would think that he played very poorly, especially early
Mhm.
on in that game. And yeah, there were a few errant throws and stuff early, but I thought he actually played really well. First off, there was absolutely nothing for him to work with in that game. The Jets suck. I'm sorry to say it. I
No.
thought they would be a little bit better, but the Jets stink. I think Carolina is an above average talented team in the NFL. I think if you rank the teams in the NFL based on talent, the Carolina Panthers would be somewhere 12 to 15, 12 to 16, or maybe even
Mhm.
like 13 to 18, somewhere in that range.
Mhm.
Carolina looked like they had 10 times the number of good players than the Jets. Their defense was flying around. They couldn't protect for him. Their offensive line was getting their butt kicked. Brian Burns was winning instantly almost every time. He actually made Brian Burns, by the way, miss in the pocket a couple of times, which is really
He
impressive.
did, yeah.
Just shows you how athletic he is. He made him just freeze and he shook him out of his shoes. Second, the Panthers corners were being very, very aggressive and getting in these receivers' faces, and these Jets receivers really couldn't do anything about it. They weren't creating space, and I thought there were a few times Zach Wilson maybe escaped, and especially to Elijah Moore down the field, one to Corey Davis, where he escaped, and I thought he threw not a perfect throw, but
It
it's
was catchable,
35
though.
yards out of the down the field, and he is outside of the pocket, and it's the kind of throw that you expect your receiver to make a play on. It's a really good throw, not a perfect throw, but a really good throw, and his receivers just couldn't make plays. So I thought that would have
Mhm.
helped his stats. But in general, the Jets, they couldn't run the ball. They didn't really scheme up easy throws for him. A lot of times he would stand in the pocket and the pocket would break down. He would have to get out of the pocket. There wasn't something available right in front of him. And he did an incredible job of just maintaining his poise and managing that situation and being able to make play after play. Like, I know if you look at the box score, it looked like Sam Darnold outplayed him, and Sam Darnold probably did. Sam Darnold played pretty well, and the Panthers obviously are far superior in terms of talent. But I thought, yeah, my biggest takeaway from watching his debut is the Jets absolutely made the right decision. He handled all that was around him really well. He gave him a chance
Mhm.
to compete in that football game. They had more injuries to more important players. Yeah, Mekhi Becton was another one that
That's
was
tough.
he got carted off. That's a huge loss for the Jets. They already lost Carl Lawson. They've lost a few people already. But man, I don't know what else to say, but I thought Zach Wilson was. I'm not going to say he was great or terrific, but I thought he looked as advertised and looked the part, and he looked like a guy that could carry this Jets roster, which is something I never got that vibe from Sam Darnold.
Mhm.
He didn't seem rattled by the fact that they were so inferior in terms of their talent. He didn't take that as an excuse to make more mistakes. The interception he threw, great play by Shaq Thompson. He tried to look off the linebacker and then throw it back.
Yeah.
And he didn't move Shaq Thompson at all. And Shaq Thompson was sitting right in the throwing lane. And it was a nice reaction because he caught it really with one hand. So, I mean, that he obviously should have probably checked. But I mean, again, otherwise, for a rookie quarterback, I don't know much else to say other than given the situation he was dealing with, he played well.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up the early game, just absolute heaves that were like 30, 40 yards downfield. Because there was probably two or three of them that I thought realistically could have been caught. Like they definitely, you expect that at least one of those would have been caught. And it would have been a great play by the receiver. Like, don't get me wrong, but like he really gave his receiver more of a chance than they should have had. And I think you mentioned it too. Like he didn't lay over and just like accept defeat. Because if you really think about it, like there was a lot of bad things that could have gone wrong that did not go wrong from that. And just in general with him in the pocket, because I mean both tackles, both edges were just collapsing really, really quickly. And you would not have expected him to get out of some of the situations that he did get out of. And then the non-existent run game doesn't help either when you're in 3rd and long pretty much every time you get to 3rd down. So I thought that was tough too. And then hopefully next week they'll have Crowder back. I know James would really help with that too. And I guess my only question is they don't really have anyone that I feel like's getting great like yak or yards after catch. Maybe that's Elijah Moore for them, but I feel like Corey Davis and Crowder aren't really that type. Corey Davis looked great though, but I feel like they're missing an element there where like you'd hope they can somehow get like manufactured yards where it's not just Zach Wilson just has to, if you're getting 20 yards, Zach Wilson's throwing a 15-yard in and you're getting like a couple extra yards from it. You'd want more yak.
I think that second point that you made, I'm glad you brought it up because that was the most shocking thing of this game. I watched almost this entire game start to finish simultaneous with the Niners game because I was really interested to see both Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold. And one of the shocking things is Mike LaFleur, right? He's a Kyle Shanahan disciple. And when you think of that offense, you think it's going to be quarterback friendly. You think there's going to be a lot of easy completions for the quarterback. I felt like they gave Zach Wilson nothing easy. There was nothing available, I felt like, that entire game for him. They had a couple boots that they gave him an easy throw in the flat, but for the most part, it felt like they were just dropping him back. He was under pressure just about every single play, and he just had to make throw after throw. And his accuracy and placement is really, really good, especially paired with this quick release. I know we talked about it during the preseason. I really think in terms of his talent, the sky is the limit. He doesn't look like the game's going too fast for him, honestly. He really settled into that game in spite of having a very inferior offense in terms of talent compared to the Panthers defense, which I think will be very good. Like Derek Brown looked good. Brian Burns, we already talked about it. We think he's going to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Jeremy Chin looked fantastic.
The secondary, the corners, Dante Jackson looked really good. Like there was just no separation.
Fast. Yeah, the Panthers defense is fast, it's big, it's strong. It's all that draft capital that's been invested the last 2 years is coming into fruition for them with their defense. It looks really, really, really good. And when I see that and the fact that he was able to react in spite of them starting George Fant at tackle and having him play extended snaps against trying to block against Brian Burns. I think if the Jets are able to put a little bit more around him in the coming years, he could really, really be something special. And I don't think I never felt that way about Sam Darnold, even though he was often put in these type situations. I never felt like he could single-handedly give your team a chance in that game. And I thought in that Week 1 game, Zach Wilson was the only thing that gave along with a few mental errors from Carolina. Like Sam Darnold missed a few easy touchdown throws that he just missed wide open people. But I felt like Zach Wilson was single-handedly giving the Jets a chance in that game.
Definitely. And I think I was a little shocked too, because I mean, I think you were probably with me on this, but we didn't really think the Jets would be like, this 500 team, but I didn't think they would be that 1-win team they were last year. But on the offense, like they couldn't run. They weren't getting any yak or really separation. The pass protection was weak. I thought it would have been better this year. They invested a lot in the offense. They brought in Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Elijah Verrett Tucker. They got a lot of guys, a lot of new people, Michael Carter, a new scheme, but it just did not look as good as we would have thought it would. In general,
I thought by drafting, Elijah Verrett Tucker and having Becton, the offensive line, would be better and they would cope better. And maybe this team, we didn't think 500, but we were thinking they wouldn't come out and look so bereft of talent. Yes. But I guess that's what happens when Carl Lawson gets hurt and all of that in training camp, because the Jets really did look bereft of talent. They looked quite inferior across the board. Their secondary, their corners did not. I mean, they had a couple corners who stepped up and played well, but it definitely didn't look, like guys that you can consistently put on Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore and Terrace Marshall. They struggled to even run with Christian McCaffrey, their linebackers. In general, it was just, I felt like overall, like the Jets felt like a very inferior team, but at least they got the quarterback right. I think Robert Saleh is the right coach. So we'll just see how this progresses, because the Jets, obviously, there's no expectation for them to be good this year, even next year. They just have to build a team for 2 years from now. And they have a lot of positive players in that direction when you look at Zach Wilson, Mekhi Becton. Vera Tucker had a very rough debut, but I
Yeah.
mean, most people I liked him coming out of USC, so I think it'll be a lot better. And Corey Davis, most part looked pretty good to me. Elijah Moore had a
Look good.
great camp. All of those people, so should be good.
And yeah, I think that's the main thing too. Like, they're not expected to be good this year, but you still want to like see your foundational pieces show you something, even in a quote unquote like wasted year, a year where you're probably getting last in the division, bearing just catastrophic events happening. And I guess really for them, just like 5 wins would be a huge. It'd be 4 games better than last year. That'd be a huge improvement. So hopefully they I guess improve this year and they get a little more easy throws for Zach, so he's not always doing everything outside of the pocket and on the run.
Agreed. Which kind of segues us perfectly to another rookie quarterback debut.
Mm.
I thought this rookie quarterback played phenomenal. I watched this game
Yeah.
start to finish. I watched it in depth, and then I went and watched it back this morning. And I actually talked to a couple people who I really respect, and I'll say what they said. But I thought Mac Jones was terrific. But I want to hear your thoughts on how
Mm.
Mac Jones played, because we haven't really talked about this yet. But how do you think Mac Jones looked against a very difficult Dolphins defense week 1?
Yeah, I'll just start with the external factors. Playing against a really good defense, right? Dolphins have probably the best cornerback duo in the league right now, and O-line held up well. 2 running back fumbles, which is very not Patriot of just a Bill Belichick team. Like, you wouldn't expect that. I thought they did
Second
a
one
lot of
lost
good.
them the game.
Yeah, the Damian Harris one was really tough, but I thought overall, like for scoring 16 points, he did a lot better than that. Very on time with his throws. I felt like he was fitting it, like or just timing in general. Especially on the intermediate routes for him seem super easy, where like the timing is perfect, knows where to put the ball, usually low and away from the defender and all that. And then one thing I noticed with him too is when he is, hitting a guy in stride, it really does matter where the ball placement is. Because if you can hit them in stride so that they can keep running, that's a lot more yards than if they have to turn around or make an adjustment to the ball. And I thought he did a fantastic job at that, especially for getting the ball to guys like Jacoby Myers. Jonnu Smith played a really awesome game in his debut. So I thought getting the ball to those guys looked good. And then his best pass of the day for me was that James White on the sideline, just on
3rd
an
and 8.
absolute rope. You could not have asked for a better throw right over, just literally right in stride. I thought that was incredible.
That was Brady-esque, that 3rd and 8 throw.
Yeah, that was insane. And I think the only thing that he didn't do, but wasn't really asked to do, was like any deep balls. But if that's not in the game plan, you can't hold it against him, right? Like you can't really ask him to do that, but he did not do that or was not
Yeah.
asked to. So
I
you
mean,
can't really hold it against him in any way, shape, or form.
I agree with that, but I also think that with the deep balls, and I know you brought it up earlier to me when we discussed it very briefly, and I actually disagree with it, and here's why. Well, first of all, I think 98% of a quarterback's game is 0 to 15 yards, especially in the modern NFL with all the open spacing and the introduction of spread off and the more frequent uses of spread offenses and all of that. And he was obviously unbelievable there, and we expected it. I think the big thing with the deep ball is that I just think they had 0 opportunities to throw the football down the field. They don't have anybody on their team that can win down the field. And we
Yeah.
saw it, and it makes it difficult for them because they have to be so precise and surgical. And when you have these 15-play drives and Damian Harris fumbles at the 8-yard line, there's nothing you can do because there's no quick stop to your offense where if you get the ball back, you can score in 20 seconds. So that was the one thing. And then the other thing is the Dolphins have an incredible defense. They
do.
prevent big plays because their secondary is maybe the best in the NFL. It's so deep, it is stacked. And the Patriots receivers, I like Kendrick Bourne, I like Aguilar, I like Henry, I like all of these people. They're not going to win consistently against those corners. Those corners are way too good. It's not just Jones and Howard. We always talk about Nick Needham. He's good. He's good.
Great
I
slot
don't know what else to
quarterback.
say, but he's a good slot corner. Yeah. But
Mhm.
to talk on Mac Jones, I think it's the best rookie quarterback debut I've ever seen in terms of playing from the
Mhm.
pocket. I don't think I've ever seen a rookie quarterback on their first game ever play better from the pocket than I was seeing from Mac Jones. I was shocked by how good Mac Jones was. I mean, the question with Mac Jones and the questions people had about him succeeding was that because he has specific physical limitations that, say, a Justin Fields and a Trey Lance and a Zach Wilson and a Trevor Lawrence don't have, can he have the answers to solve problems mentally? And people question whether he could do that early on. He had every answer in that game. The Dolphins gave him a ton of blitzes. They ran a lot of cover zero looks. They brought a lot of corners blitzing. And every single time Mac Jones knew where to go with the ball, he moved unbelievably well in the pocket. The one play, I think they had a 3rd and 8. You brought up the James White throw. That was unreal throw, right?
Yeah,
And then
that was incredible.
he had another 3rd and 8 where they had cover zero. They didn't get it blocked up. He had a free rusher right in his face, and he drifted left and kept him coming until he had a frontside dig that just came across his face, and he put it right on his chest. Now, the guy ended up being wide open, but for him to have the presence to delay the rusher and create that little bit of space and throw it on 3rd and 8 when most rookie quarterbacks usually panic with a free rusher in their face right off the snap was incredible. I liked Mac Jones before the draft. I did not expect him to play like this. He was this was unbelievable. He seemed to have every answer pre-snap and post-snap in terms of knowing where to go with the ball, understanding where defenses, if they blitz from where they're going to replace people in coverage to be able to cover up for the holes for the guys they're blitzing. I thought that was unreal. I thought he was unbelievably accurate. Like his accuracy, you talked about his ball placement. It was fantastic. His movement in the pocket, which we talked about, was something that stood out for us in preseason. Once again, I thought stood out because I didn't think the Patriots O-line pass protected particularly well. They got a lot of 5-man rushes, and Mac Jones was really able to move and create space in the pocket really well. And then one last thing that I was talking about. So I was texting back and forth this morning about Mac Jones with Kyle Posey. A lot of people know him. He's the guy who runs Niners Nation. He's phenomenal at what he does, knows more football than just about anybody. And one thing he shared with me that I thought was really interesting, and I thought it stood out from that game. I mean, head to head in that game, I thought Mac Jones looked like the better quarterback than Tua.
Yeah.
I thought he consistently just knew where to go with the ball and the accuracy. And he said, and the one thing that to me that stood out, and now this might not be the case, but thus far into Mac Jones's career, I think it's real cool to see. We've talked so much about Mac Jones's physical limitations throughout this draft process and all of that. He said there was not one time in that game you felt like Mac Jones's physical limitations were preventing him from making a play. And that just tells you how good he was mentally because he had every answer mentally to be able to cover up for that. On the other hand, you saw those moments with Tua, like the pick. He didn't have the answer with the blitz, and he ran out, and he's trying to just throw it away, or I don't know what he was trying to do, but he looked slow, trying to run away from Josh Uche and Matt Judon, and then his arm looked weak trying to throw that ball away. He looked rattled when he threw that pick. You saw, but that was one moment, right? You saw other moments throughout that game where really Tua's bread and butter play is really just an RPO where he reads the front side defender and throws a slant right behind him if it's not available, or he hands it off. He's been running that since Alabama, or the little glance route. They run it all the time. That's what he's really good at. I mean, I didn't even want to be that, because I didn't want the Niners to draft Mac Jones. Obviously, I'm a Niners fan, but I was just totally floored with how good Mac Jones was. I mean, it's just one game, but I didn't expect him to look that comfortable, that poised, be able to answer so many questions mentally and be so accurate against that good of a defense. His first start of his NFL career as a rookie, shocking to me.
And it felt like every time the rush was on him or there was a guy coming in, like it was instant. Like he knew where the guy was, he knew where the ball needed to be, and it was there.
Unreal.
And it was there quick. Like how many times did the ball go to the flat when there was someone either just getting through one of the O linemen or someone coming in uncontested on him? And it's just like it is a world of difference going from that to an incompletion. It's like getting 7 yards for your quarterback, just knowing when and where to go with the ball. It was really, really impressive seeing all that. And I mean, when you look at the score, they only scored 16, right? But it's very deceiving considering how well he played. And I'd imagine, against not as good of a defense as the Dolphins, which I think everyone would say is a top 10 defense, no doubt. I wonder what they will do. They're probably not going to have 2 fumbles again. The running looked solid overall, just in general, and the passing looked good. The only thing missing is you're right. They just don't have a guy that can beat someone vertically, and that will be an issue at some point this year. And it kind of, you could even argue, almost was when you need a quick strike. What are you going to do? Because like Nelson, he's a deep threat, but like him against Xavier Howard, are you just going to throw one up to him? I don't know. I probably wouldn't go that direction if I were the team either.
So yeah, and I agree. I agree with you. I think I think if they can get some speed, it's going to be real trouble if Mac Jones plays at this level, because he's playing at a very, very high level right now mentally and with his accuracy and all that. And if they get him speed, which, speaking of speed, by the way, Waddle, we both, especially you, loved Waddle before the draft. He looked
so
amazing.
He
was different.
That play in the slot where he pretty much just ran like a slot fade, he had like a couple yards of separation on that dude, and it was just such a bad throw, but he just went up and got it anyway. I felt,
dude, not to mention
awesome.
His awesome lateral movement, like we talked about before the draft, that's what separated him from the other speed guys. He looked like a different mover on the field. But going off of that point, you brought up the speed, right? The speed thing for them adding an explosive element to their offense. Obviously, it's needed. But the reason the Patriots scored 16 points is because this game, like 17-16, doesn't tell you how well these offenses played. Both offenses were very efficient for most of the game. Like, I'm not the biggest Tua fan. You're higher on Tua than me, but not the biggest Tua fan. He overall played a solid game. There were moments of shakiness, but it was overall above average in terms of his performance. Like, it was a good game for him. But he was like, both offenses were really just moving the ball very methodically. I think the Patriots at one point, there was a stat that they had like 4 10-plus play drives.
Yeah,
if you're going to have 4 10-plus play drives, we're talking about 5-6 minute drives, right? The clock is getting chewed quickly, and that's why these teams didn't have that many possessions to score that many points, because neither were quick strike. And that's where if the Patriots had something explosive to their offense, because the run game looks good. If Damian Harris doesn't fumble the ball, they win that game basically with their run game in this surgical and very precise and methodical offense. But if you give them some explosive element, like imagine if they had a Jalen Waddle to go with Mac Jones. Mac Jones has a good deep ball too. I mean, given how he looks, I mean, I think New England could really be challenging teams. But my overall takeaway, I mean, we talked about how good Mac Jones was and all of that. I thought both these teams looked like playoff teams. Like, I told you, 11 games on Sunday. So, like, you get an idea to see how good teams' rosters are. To me, both of these teams look like playoff teams to me. They both looked really, really good.
That felt like a playoff game, and the Browns-Chiefs game felt like a playoff game. I don't know how many other games you could have said that about yesterday. I really don't, because those two games just had a playoff atmosphere. It was more than just a week one matchup. It felt like something more than that. And maybe for the Dolphins and Patriots, it's because obviously they're division rivals. Both are, at least in our thoughts, going to be in that playoff contention. So every game matters, especially one against a division rival who's also looking to push for the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, basically, that was our thoughts on Mac Jones. Both of us thought he was really, really good. I was really floored. I did not expect Mac Jones to play like that. But moving on, we have a lot to get to. We got to touch on the Jason Verrett injury. I mean, you and I have talked about the Niners a lot this offseason. Cornerback depth has always been a point of concern that we have brought up and we have talked about, as in saying, like, hey, like, this is really their biggest Achilles heel. We're not sure what they're going to do. We felt like Verrett was a good starter, and then, Mosley would be fine, and then Lenore kind of emerged this offseason. But now Verrett, he's out for the season. He tore his ACL. Where do you think the Niners go from here? How do you think this affects them? And looking at the division and seeing how well those other teams played, how do you think this affects them overall within there?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, first and foremost, me and you have kind of been on this the whole offseason. We are saying we know Jason Verrett's there, but he has a long injury history. Now, we've said before, like, what does it even mean to be injury prone? Can you predict injuries? All of that. But all you and I were saying is that yes, Jason Verrett, when healthy, he looks like a top 10 corner. He's fantastic. You throw him out there, plug and play, no worries. But availability is the best availability, and it's an issue that he can't be out there. So we are a little, I guess the term would be
Skeptical.
cautiously optimistic about him this year. And worst case scenario, week 1, he's down for the season. And then the secondary just starts looking a little more shaky. I know they got Ambry Thomas. Lenoir has apparently been really good in camp and the preseason and all that, but I am still worried about what are they going to do when DK Metcalf, DeAndre Hopkins, and those type of guys. You're playing those type of guys. But I think even more so than the secondary, what I think is going to put the most pressures on now is the defensive line to generate pressure as quickly and as best as you possibly can from all sides. Because the only really way to alleviate this is you're not getting a free agent cornerback that you can plug in. You're probably not going to be able to trade for anyone because cornerback's a very premium position. So at this point, it's really, I think, a lot of stress is on the defensive line and the DC to create pressure and give the secondary time to actually cover for longer, because as of right now, losing someone as good as Verrett is just tough. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. Like, we kept talking about this cornerback depth issue, and I think our biggest thing wasn't that, there was, like, for example, I was talking about this with Grant earlier. There's 64 starting corners in the NFL that start for 32 teams. I don't think all 32 teams have 2 starting caliber corners.
Definitely
There are
not.
very few teams. I mean, you have teams like Denver, teams like Miami that have 3 or 4 guys that could start, but like the
Patriots,
reason
yeah.
corner allocation, the roster allocation, and in terms of into corners, especially early in drafts, is so important is because it's so difficult to find starting corners. For example, the Niners just signed both Josh Norman and Dre Kirkpatrick. I don't think neither of those guys are going to make a massive impact in terms of being able to start for the Niners and contribute. I think they're just depth pieces. But I also look at, like, for example, Ambry Thomas, he does not look ready to play this year. I think he might be good maybe in the future. I don't want to write him off. We're 6 months into his NFL career,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't look like this year he can handle NFL wide
It's a big
receivers.
ass.
So he needs
It
to
is
sit
a
out.
big
So,
ass.
right. So now you have basically Lenoir and Mosley. And I like Lenoir and Mosley as starters on the other side of Verrett, who's a top 12 to 10 to 12 corner in the NFL. Starting them next to each other, I think the best thing to talk about is, like you said, there's just more pressure on this defensive line. And it's going to be more pressure specifically on D Ford and Nick Bosa, because D Ford and Nick Bosa are really the 2 special guys on this defensive line. And Ford played very little, very sparingly yesterday, but when he played, he
Mhm.
stood out. D Ford looked like D Ford. I mean, the pick six with Dre Greenlaw, that's created by D Ford and his ability to just take the right tackle and bull rush him all the way back into Jared Goff. And then, of course, Goff threw a terrible ball. I don't know where he was throwing it. And it's an easy pick six for Greenlaw. So I think that's where the pressure, they're going to have to really, really change games. I think this corner depth is an issue, especially when you look at Verrett's impact later in the season. They beat Arizona the second time last year because they got really physical with DeAndre Hopkins. And you can press DeAndre Hopkins if you have Jason Verrett. I would be scared to press DeAndre Hopkins if I had Emmanuel Mosley and Diamador Lenoir trying to
Yeah,
get
that's
physical with him. And we saw that the Niners didn't press DeAndre Hopkins when they started Sherman and Mosley week 1, and DeAndre Hopkins, I think, had like 12
feasted.
catches for 120
Yeah.
yards and 2 touchdowns against them. So Jason Verrett's obviously a massive loss for the 49ers. They definitely need to, the only way they're going to be able to solve this issue and, move on further, it's not going to be by getting better corners. They have to make do with what they have and hope those guys play well. And Lenoir played a good game. Granted, it was against a very poor receiving core with Tyrell Williams and Amon St. Brown for the Lions. I think that you're going to have to see a better um, pass rush. I think this pass rush is just going to have to dominate games. And if this pass rush dominate games, they have 2 good safeties who both are starting. They have good linebackers led by Fred Warner, the best in the NFL. It should be fine, more or less, to be able to cover up, because they're not going to be able to sign a corner like Kirkpatrick Norman. Those guys
Yeah.
aren't going to come in and do anything, and they're not going to. And maybe they can trade for one. Maybe Stephon Gilmore, week 7, week 8, once he's off pup. you go get him. I don't know with what resources they can go get him, but really that's where the Niners are at. I think that's the reality. There's nothing else to say, but you just have to move on and hope that your pass rush and your safeties and all of them can compensate.
And I know, or at least seeing this from Niners Twitter, that Shanahan himself said like cornerback depth is just like something that's really huge for us and something that's going to be a big part of our season, and we really do need it. But it seems like it was kind of a, one foot in the door, one foot out in their just willingness to address it this year, just in general. I mean, yes, they took in Ambry Thomas and Lenore, but if that's your debatably weakest position, taking Banks, a guard, that was also a position I need. But a running back, like trading up for Trey Sermon when you know you need a cornerback so desperately, it makes you scratch your head. And maybe even taking more guys later. All I know is it was debatably just not addressed as much as it should have, knowing that if this one guy goes down, your cornerback duos are just not where it needs to be, considering, how many good receivers are in the NFL. Because I think that's the thing too, right? Like you've mentioned, there's 64 starting corners. There's also 64 starting receivers, and there's a lot of guys that play in the slot too. But there's a lot more better receivers than there are corners by just a considerable amount.
Yeah. I think just about every team has two good receivers. I think like 12 teams have two good corners.
Yeah.
I could name like 15 teams that have three good receivers. So I'm totally with you. And I think that's where, like, you wish, I mean, even the Banks, like, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Good corners go in the top 50 picks of the draft. I mean, look at the best ones. Marlon Humphrey, he's playing right now. He was the 15th overall pick in the draft. Jair Alexander was the 18th pick in the draft. Stephon Gilmore, 10th pick in the draft to Buffalo. Jalen Ramsey was the 5th pick in the draft. Like, I mean, go through the history. Besides Richard Sherman, which elite corner do you remember that was not a highly touted first-round pick? Joe Hayden was picked 7th. Patrick Peterson was picked 5th. Darrelle Revis was picked 12th. All these guys get picked very highly because it's really difficult to find corners. You have to be a really elite athlete to play corner. And even if you draft a corner in the top 40, 50 picks because he is that elite athlete, there's a good chance he doesn't live up. I mean, look at the Packers. They draft a corner every other year high, and they're 2 for 4. They're 2 for 4 in their last. I mean, we'll see on Eric Stokes, but they're technically, I would say, 2 for 4. I mean, Josh Jackson didn't work out, but I like more or less Quentin Rollins and Demarius Randall didn't work out, but more or less, I think I was more talking Rollins, Jackson, King, and Jair. I think King even being able to start for them for this long and be fine on the other side, be just average, is a hit pick because it's so difficult to get corners. I mean, you wish King was a star. You picked him, what, 29th, 28th, but the reality of the situation is it's so hard to play corner that if King is an average starter, that's fine. So that to me is the most important thing. It's unfortunate for the for that it went down this way. The Niners have not addressed corner at any point with a high pick in the draft, so we knew that this situation would be there, and we knew the depth was shaky to begin with. And so really the best thing for them is that they compensate with great pass rush, great safety play, great linebacker play, and they compensate around it because Mosley and Lenore can be fine, but they need abundance of help.
They need good safeties, they need good linebackers, and they need a fantastic pass rush. And I guess the good thing is the linebackers, you can count on those. Safeties, more or less, you can also count on those as well, as long as, they're healing from their own injuries. And then the D-line, which last year was tough because Bosa was out, so that really put a stamp in things. But, I mean, I guess I think end of the day for me is the D-line's going to have to just create pressure a lot. And
it's going to have to dominate.
DeMeco Ryan's going to have some creative and well-timed blitzes to actually, just give them help because man-on-man DeAndre Hopkins versus Lenore or Ambry Thomas, that is a tough ask at the end of the day.
I think, Jamal, more or less, our point is that you can't that's why you can't address this position now. Honestly, it's frankly very difficult to address this position in off seasons too. Very few times do a Stephon Gilmore hit the open market and you can go sign him for big money. Most of the time, you have to sign a guy like Tremaine Johnson, who's a clear tier below the elite corners, and you go sign him for elite corner money because there's just not that many corners available, and you have to go sign him. The only way to address this is to go draft a cornerback next year. If they have the 18th pick in the draft, it would be nice to go draft an elite cornerback prospect, but it's tough to do that. The Niners don't seem to value it that way. So we'll see what happens. But I personally think they will miss Jason Verrett a ton. I thought he was playing at a really high level. And on a side note, I just feel really bad for him because I thought if he made it through the season healthy, he would get his payday and a long-term contract, which he totally deserves. But
yeah, I mean, the only guy who this offseason I know was kind of rumored to maybe be able to be traded for was Gilmore, and now he's injured. And then for whatever reason, maybe this is just me just looking too far into it, but J.C. Jackson of the Patriots as well. They only tendered him with a second rounder, which is really surprising. And I know he had some struggles at the end of last year with Stephon Diggs, but he still had a ton of interceptions. And I think as a number 2 is fantastic for the Patriots. So,
I mean, he would be the number one on the 49ers by far.
He's the number one on probably like 10 teams or at least like
again.
Yeah.
Which brings us all the way a full 180 back to the point that there are very few very good corners in the NFL. There are very few good corner tandems in the NFL. There's very few teams with a very good single corner in the NFL, which is why drafting corners is very important. Which now segues us to a team that does believe drafting corners is very important. And it's also a team that one of my co-host here, Blake, really, really likes. And they looked really, really, really bad on Sunday. So I'm just gonna sit back. I'm gonna give him the floor and just hear his thoughts about how his Green Bay Packers looked that sunny day in Jacksonville. I mean, against the New Orleans Saints, because that was not what any of us expected.
No. And I will say before we start, the Saints were pushing for the game to be in Jacksonville because in Aaron Rodgers' career, they've struggled in Jacksonville and just Florida in general, which don't know why. It's such a weird thing. It's kind of like the Patriots too. Like the Patriots with Brady were like 500 at Hard Rock against the Dolphins. It didn't matter how good they were, just for whatever reason in a summer, like near summer, they would lose. So maybe it's something with that. I don't know, but just going off of this, and I know LaFleur kind of after the game was saying a lot of the responsibilities on him. Should have ran the ball more. Agreed with that. For whatever reason, A.J. Dillon looked good. They just didn't want to give him the ball. They kind of abandoned Aaron Jones early too. The only good thing on offense for the Packers was Elton Jenkins. And Elton Jenkins he played left tackle. The dude can play anywhere on the O-line. Like this dude's going to get paid a lot, but he looked fantastic. Rodgers just looked in general. Maybe it was the offseason, maybe it was Jacksonville, but something just seemed off. The throw into it wasn't double coverage. It ended up being double coverage, but he didn't think it was double coverage, the Williams interception. And then the one where, usually you'd see him take a sack, right? And he stepped up, threw it behind, resulted in an interception, just very un-Aaron Rodgers-like. He has as many interceptions in week 1 as he had all of last year. Or not all of last year, but 40% of last year, which is kind of hard to believe, 2 to 5. So just at the end of the day, tough game for them. And just the defense too. I guess I can touch on that. So Joe Barry, the new DC, coming in, and it felt like I wanted Dom Capers back. And I never thought I would ever say that. Because at least Dom Capers would sometimes get pressure with a blitz. He'd force a turnover. They'd allow a lot of points, of course. But sometimes they'd be good. It just felt like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it just never felt like the Saints were being close to stopped. Like not once.
No.
Every time it would be second or third and short. Like there was never a negative play on first down or second down, is what it seemed. The only good person who I thought played best on the defense was Stokes and Jair. Hopefully Stokes is out there more. Kevin King somehow got burned by Dante Harris, who's like a third or fourth string on the Saints.
That was a dime from Jameis. That was a beauty.
I will say this. I thought Jameis's overall game, besides a few plays, was a little overrated because everything was open. But that touchdown pass to Juwan Johnson, the one back the end zone, when he was getting tackled was great. And then the bomb to Harris was also impressive. Otherwise, I thought like everyone was wide open for the most part. He used his legs really well, but that was just my overall take on the game. But I guess, Vish, what are your thoughts from an outsider on the whole Aaron Rodgers frame of it and people saying that it was a distraction and he could not have possibly been ready,
Well,
potentially
so
due to not being there?
I actually disagree with that. Like, okay, so was Aaron Rodgers bad in that game? Yeah, it was probably the worst game I've ever seen Aaron Rodgers play. Is that going to be
One
the
of yeah,
topic of conversation? Yes, probably. I mean, he definitely looked a little bit rattled by the pressure, and he definitely didn't look like he wanted to get hit, and he definitely did not, play up to his usual Aaron Rodgers standards. But my biggest takeaway was that the Packers they got their butts handed to them on both line of scrimmages. The Saints defensive line absolutely dominated the Packers offensive line. The Packers defensive line got absolutely dominated by the Saints
just killed.
offensive line, who lost Eric McCoy early in that game, and that was a big difference. I mean, Jameis is standing in that pocket, and it's not like they have great receivers in New Orleans, especially without Michael Thomas.
No.
There's not a lot available for them. And the Packers have very good corners. Eric Stokes looked fast and explosive, and he was
He
playing very
did.
physical when he played. Jair Alexander, obviously one of the best in the business. We know what he does, but Jameis had all day, and Jameis had all day to then move around, scramble. The Packers front four could do nothing. And
Mhm.
Joe Barry, obviously, he is a little bit of old school coordinator in the sense that he comes from the Tampa Bay defenses that kind of segued Monty Kiffin into the Seattle defenses. So they believe in rushing four and dropping seven. And they played very vanilla defenses in terms of just rushing four and trying to create pressure and dropping seven. And that did not work because they could
Not
not
at
get
all.
pressure on the quarterback. They got their butts handed to them on both lines of scrimmage. And I think that was the most important thing. And obviously, Rodgers played poorly. I think most people are going to sit and overanalyze Rodgers, what his personality did to the team. I really don't think those things made an impact. And I still think the Packers' overall outlook in the season is going to be fine because I just believe Rodgers will be a lot better. But the Packers' offensive line has not gotten their butt handed to them like that, maybe since the 2019 championship game.
Yeah.
They got absolutely destroyed in this game. I mean,
Buccaneers.
you talked about Elton Jenkins playing well. The other four guys were not playing that well. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that was probably my talent in their secondary. Demario Davis, monster, top 8, 7 middle linebacker in the NFL. And then their defensive line is one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. We just don't talk about it. But Jordan is amazing. Davenport's really good. So yeah.
Also, just generally speaking, the Packers receivers were not getting a lick of separation. Like not at all. Devontae was getting locked up pretty good by Lattimore. MVS and Lazard weren't getting any separation. Bobby Tonyan doesn't really get much separation to begin with. There wasn't anything coming out of the backfield necessarily. I it just seemed off. And that's where to your point, like sure you can say Rodgers looked rattled or whatever. He made a couple bad throws, but realistically, like looking back, there was only a couple times where you could really blame him. And there was one, it was a mesh concept, and Aaron Jones was wide open on a drag, and he waited to throw it to him, and then eventually got tackled. Where if he would have threw it earlier, he would have got it. But it was very few and far between where you can say, all right, Rodgers, like the guy was open, you missed him or stuff along that sorts. But most of the time it was he's in the pocket. There's no one with any separation going on. Guys aren't getting schemed up, whatever it is. And he's either, throwing it out of bounds, taking a sack or whatever. And you can't, I just feel like you also can't blame him for that too. Like if there's no one open and he's not throwing it, there's a reason he's not throwing it. So yeah, I think you're right. It's maybe getting a little overblown, and I'm happy LaFleur, he came out and said like, this is my fault. I should have called a better game plan. He's not passing off any blame, which I think is just a very mature thing of him to say.
I 100% agree. And so we got another topic to get into. So we're moving. We got three more topics. We got to talk
Mm-hmm.
about Joe Burrow, and then we got to talk about two NFC West teams that looked really, really good on Sunday. Actually, all four looked real good, but I didn't watch the Seattle Indianapolis game that much. I'll wait to watch it a bit later. And so let's talk about Joe Burrow and
Mm,
the Vikings. You and I both think that the Vikings were going to be a playoff team this year. Pretty poor showing from them. But you and I also thought the Bengals weren't
yeah.
going to be very good. We were worried about this Joe Burrow situation. We were worried about Zach Taylor. The Bengals finally found a way to run the football with Joe Mixon, and they were able to do it. Joe Burrow looked terrific. Jamar Chase looked really good. You and I were saying don't overreact. His hands are his best trait. We had other questions about him that he seemed to answer. He looked explosive. He looked great. So, what did you think of the Bengals' overall performance against the Vikings? And I think there's a lot to be positive about.
Oh, definitely. The fact that they have three receivers that all looked really, really, really good. T. Higgins obviously was a rookie last year, looked great. Jamar Chase's first game looked good. Boyd is just quietly awesome. No one talks about him, but he's also really, really good. But I thought for me, the biggest surprise was Jonah Williams and Riley Reef played great. They played amazing for tackles. Like, none of the sacks, there was 5 sacks, which I'm still definitely concerned about, but they really weren't the tackle's fault at all. The center played a tough game. That was kind of the biggest issue I thought them there. But Joe Burrow looked really good. Didn't look worried in the pocket, delivering strikes. He had to move around a little bit too because, as mentioned, the interior of the O line wasn't always the best. And you're right, they ran the ball well, which is something we really haven't been able to say in just it feels like a couple years since Joe Mixon's been fully healthy. But I really am. I hope this isn't just a one-off thing. Like, I don't know if you remember that Seattle Seahawks game a few years ago, where Andy Dalton had like 400 yards against the Seahawks, and it looked like a new team, and then it just wasn't. But I was very impressed with Burrow. Got the ball out quickly. There's only one really bad throw. I thought the one that should have been picked hit the Vikings defender in the head, and then Boyd caught it. That was crazy. But yeah, he looked really solid back there, and just not concerned or not didn't look like someone who just came off a major injury. I guess is what I'm trying to get to with how he
Yeah,
played.
that was my biggest takeaway because most people were saying that Joe Burrow had a pretty terrible camp, and that's what the reports are. I don't know what the Cincinnati reporters, but there was bad stuff about Burrow. Chase obviously wasn't having positivity coming his way. The only guy that was getting consistent positivity from
T.
everything I
Higgins.
read was T. Higgins, right?
Yeah.
Felt like T. Higgins was having an incredible camp. And so we go to week one, and I think the Vikings are going to be a playoff team. And now I have zero expectations for Cincinnati. And I think Burrow is going to be a little bit rattled. Like you mentioned, like maybe he was less mobile. He was less willing to run around. Like a few of those sacks, I felt like old Joe Burrow would have made a play a bit earlier, moved a bit better in the pocket. But this Joe Burrow, obviously, naturally, he's recovering from a surgery. But overall, he looked like Joe Burrow. He was processing quickly. He was making great decisions. He was very accurate. I thought his arm looked stronger, which is important
It did. Yeah.
because Joe Burrow's biggest issue to me as a quarterback is just the fact that he has a below average NFL arm. And his arm looked much stronger. Like the touchdown to Chase, that one was thrown with a ton of velocity down the
Yeah.
field on the go ball to Chase. I thought that was a great throw. And so overall, it was a lot better than what I expected. I thought Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow both looked real good. I'm a big Joe Mixon fan. I consistently say he's a top 10 running back in the NFL, and I thought he showed out. And so overall, I was thoroughly impressed with the Bengals. Like you mentioned, Riley Reef had a good game. Jonah Williams looked like a guy that was worth the 11th overall pick. They
Hmm.
handled Daniil Hunter and Co really well and company really well. And then I thought the Bengals defense also stood out to me. They're
They did.
faster and they
Yeah.
fly around a bit more than what I expected. They played the run really well. Jesse Bates is obviously fantastic.
Oh, good.
He was good, but Von Bell was playing great. Their defensive line did generate pressure. Of course, the Vikings' offensive line is horrendous, but the defense,
Yeah.
in terms of pass blocking, but the defensive line did create pressure. I was pleasantly surprised by the overall performance by the Bengals, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that Joe Burrow looked like um, 85% of Joe Burrow week one, which I did not expect given all the things I was seeing in the training camps and
Mhm.
stuff. Like I was expecting Joe Burrow to I was scared honestly that Joe Burrow might have like an RG3 type situation, where
Mm.
he just never fully recovers from his knee or has that confidence, but he didn't seem to have that issue at all against a team that
Mhm.
I thought would be good week 1. So,
Definitely. I think that's the point too. Like me and you both went in with this expectation that the Vikings are going to have a top 10 D, maybe even better. They're bringing back so many pieces. Michael Pierce looked great, though. I will say that he had a couple sacks. He was a beast. But Daniil Hunter wasn't really like game wrecking. And I fully went into this thinking this Vikings D line's got a lot of new pieces back. I think they might wreak havoc on this Bengals O line that has struggled to protect the quarterback for the last few years. But now there was 5 sacks. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he was, not touched, but it just felt a lot better than previously where both tackles, both sides of the pocket are just absolutely collapsing. And that
mhm.
that to me, I think, was the biggest thing. And then yeah, just I don't know, man. I was a very I would me personally, I was a big critic against the Chase pick. He showed out. So far proved me wrong, although Sewell looked really good too. But maybe they didn't need the tackle after all if Williams and Reef are going to play how they did. Now, the interior guys, especially the center, that leaves a little to be seen. But I mean, overall, like the offense looked great. And I really think having Mixon back and healthy is just a world of different than having Gio or P. Ryan back there at all times. So hopefully that
Definitely,
helps
definitely.
just having a full roster. And did want to mention one thing too. The fourth down play that iced it to Uzoma, that was actually an audible from Burrow. And he picked that play and he called that play um, once they got to the line of scrimmage. So I did want to throw that out there and say that was awesome for doing that. Very savvy, very veteran. CJ Uzoma got wide open. It was a weird play at first, though. It really didn't seem like much was going on, and then he just kind of streaked open. It was like, all right, well, that's the ball game if
Game.
this kicker makes it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jamal mentioned, to be fair, I'm not comparing them. I think Burrow plays from the pocket a million times better than RG3 has ever shown to in his career. Burrow is really fantastic in the pocket, especially his ability to make decisions and quick decisions and all of that is amazing. I just went more so to say that, like, in terms of an athlete losing confidence in himself just because it's a major injury and a quick turnaround. Like, nobody expected Joe Burrow to play week 1 when he initially got injured. He tore 3 ligaments in his knee. People were saying week 6, week 7, and then all of a sudden he comes and plays week 1, and he's pretty close to what Joe Burrow is, and he plays a pretty much. You mentioned one bad throw, maybe mistake-free football game for them to
Yeah,
win. Pretty amazing, pretty amazing.
definitely.
And so we got to move on from Joe Burrow to another number 9. This number 9 was making his debut on a
Mm.
brand new team. And this is a guy we've talked about a lot here on Blake&VishSports Sports because one of us here, me, is a huge fan of this guy. And I thought he showed out. So without further ado, Blake, how good did Matthew Stafford look in his
I mean,
Rams debut?
the fact that the first drive, he just delivers an absolute strike to Van Jefferson. And then, of course, funnily enough, the 2 veteran safeties of the Bears don't touch many scores. Beside the point, he looked awesome, though. You see the arm, you see what it's like when he has not even, for whatever reason, this man will never have a good running game, but they didn't run particularly well at the beginning or efficiently wise. But
Until late, yeah.
yeah, until they were just on the field for just seemed like nonstop. It's nice seeing him with McVay and then having just a slew of good receiving options in Cup and Woods. And I mean, I just think that you more so fact have just pointed it out. Like him with this offensive minded team and just head coach is going to be lethal. I thought his arm was just the biggest thing. Like he just looked like he could put that ball anywhere he wanted to. And overall, this offense is going to be scary. And the thing is, too, their defense is good too. So it's not like they're, asking him to do what he did on the lines and asking him to score, over 30 a game. That's not a requirement anymore. If you do, it's good. But if you don't, we can still win without that. So I'm really interested to see how this season plays out for them. I know both me and you had them as a top 3 seed in the NFC. And it's going to be a bloodbath in the NFC West, but having Stafford will kind of help with that.
So I'll touch on this real quick. It's a very similar concept to the one Trey Lance ran and threw the Trent
Mm,
Sherfield and Greg Papa's Trey area. But it's a very similar concept. But yeah, Matthew Stafford, first of all, that was an absolute frozen rope to Van Jefferson. I mean, I don't even the ball was just it's a big
right
time
over
throw.
his
He just
head.
flips his hips
Uh,
and just nails that thing. And Van Jefferson, who you and I have talked about being an impact player for the Rams in prior streams, especially very early into the draft process and offseason before Tutu Atwell and Deshaun Jackson were drafted and signed. We talked about him and he looked really good. But Matthew Stafford looked like what I expected Matthew Stafford to be. He's the two things that separate Matthew Stafford to me is that his arm, obviously, I've talked about it. It is a generational arm, like in terms of the strength and accuracy. He's got an arm that can be compared to Rodgers, Mahomes, Allen. He's one of the
mhm.
few guys that has that type of arm. And then the other thing is his pocket movement. His pocket movement is actually incredible. The Bears' defensive line did not have a bad game by any means. And it's not like the Rams' offensive line is fantastic. Khalil Mack actually was generating pressure, but Stafford's ability to move his feet, keep his eyes down the field, and
Mhm.
navigate the pocket, it was. I thought him and Dak Prescott moved the best in the pocket of every quarterback I saw personally this weekend. I
Mm.
thought Dak Prescott on Thursday and Matthew Stafford on Sunday. That was the two best. It was absolutely unbelievable. And the thing I really wanted to touch on is I didn't think their offense looked like a Jared Goff, Sean McVay offense. A Jared Goff, Sean McVay offense is very gimmicky to me. The sustainable thing about their offense is the run game. It's built on the outside zone. They have a few trap plays. They have things they can build off of it. But the other parts of that offense is the passing element of that offense is a ton of bootlegs, a ton of heavy play action, and they get you by once they get first downs, they start going fast. They start going with pace. Yesterday, the Rams were never really able to get pace into that game. They ran like two bootlegs with Stafford. They ran play action, but there was a lot of drop back, just a lot of standard play action off of, just a normal look. It wasn't off the wide, selling the wide zone and moving the quarterback and moving the pocket, and moving the launch point and all that. And Stafford was just ripping it. He was throwing unbelievably. He is so good, and I think people are going to see it. His decision making is so good. I mean, the touchdown to Cup, people thought it was a busted coverage. I was seeing Dan Orlovsky talk about it, and then I saw somebody else break it down earlier. He basically moved the second safety and created the open space for Cup. He wanted Cup the
Mm.
whole time. He manipulated the safety, made him bite on the underneath route, and just threw it right behind it. It looked like something that can be sustainable because they have a bread and butter to their offense. And what are you going to do to stop Matthew Stafford throwing like that to those receivers? Their defense looked good.
Gonna
I
be
thought
heavy.
I love Matthew Stafford. I thought he was going to look unbelievable. He looked better than what I even expected.
Mm. And that's pretty hard because your standards for him are higher than most. So he must have really impressed you then.
He looked like a top five quarterback in the league.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I thought too, just the weapons they have there too. It's like the play to Cooper Cup where it was short pass, it was third and long. The dude breaks like three tackles and gets a first down. You add that onto the fact that Stafford can just go anywhere with the ball, and it starts getting really challenging to stop that offense. They didn't even need to run the ball well to score. What did they score? Like 35 points? Imagine when
34, I
they
think.
are
Yeah.
playing a team that doesn't have Akeem Hicks down there and they're able to run the ball. And then off of that, just also have Stafford just dropping bombs to Van Jefferson and then Cooper Cup as well. Like this offense is limitless with how it's going to be able to score this year.
I think that one of the things that always used to confuse me is the difference between arm talent and arm strength. I think that, when we're talking arm strength, even a guy like Trey Lance has arm that's as strong as like, a Matthew Stafford. But you see just Stafford's natural ability to just be able to throw short, throw long, control the pace on the ball and all of that, and even make the big time, like 100-mile-an-hour throws over the middle, but then be able to throw check downs and stuff like that and take pace off the ball and throw layered balls over the middle, throw the ball with excess touch and all of that. And that's where I think there's the big difference because I think there's a lot of people in NFL history also with really, really strong arms, but they don't have this raw throwing ability that Stafford has in terms of being able to throw every type of ball, every arm angle. off every platform.
Mhm.
I mean, Lance is just one example because he doesn't have that yet. He could have that next year, whenever. But oh, Matthew Stafford, man, Matthew Stafford.
Definitely. And I thought just like from the broadcast listening to it, like Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth were just saying like how happy Sean McVay is and like, oh, now he has Matt Stafford, it's over. But I really don't feel like the national like people in the national media have been bringing it up like they were because they were talking very nonchalant about how much of an upgrade this was. And I almost felt bad for Goff. Like they were just rubbing it in his face how much better Stafford was than him. I just
Yeah,
thought that was like kind of weird. Like, geez, like chill out. Like you don't need. He was just catching strays for no reason.
yeah. It's funny because the first three and a half, like Goff's final stats against the 49ers, 38 for 57, 300 something yards, 3 touchdowns, it all looks good and dandy. But the first 3.5 quarters of that game, I just was thinking, wow, Jared Goff, like I know exactly why the Rams traded you. You do not react well under pressure. You don't make good decisions under pressure. Like there's just so many things wrong with you, Jared Goff. And I mean, he's
Mhm.
not bad, but he's just not Matthew Stafford. He's not even. I thought it was pretty apparent. I thought Jimmy G looked significantly better than Goff, and it wasn't just the system or whatever. Like Jared Goff just cannot react with people within his throwing area. Like
Mhm.
anywhere near him, and bad things happen for the Lions with Jared Goff. So I think I don't want to rip on Goff more because Al Michaels and Collinsworth did it enough.
They
But
already did
Rams
enough.
fans should be happy that they got Matthew Stafford.
I think they already are.
Finally, that leads us to our final topic of the day. And we're going to probably talk about another one of the teams in the NFC West, another team with another one of my favorite quarterbacks in the NFL. Unfortunately, he also plays in the NFC West. And I think we're going to talk about their offense. We're going to talk about their quarterback a bit too. But this team's defense is really what stood out, I think, to me. And their front four specifically and how they dominated the Titans' offensive line. Obviously, Chandler Jones had the standout game with 5 sacks, but Arizona's overall front four, Watt looked really, really good, and they just were generating pressure and making life difficult on an offense that's really, really good in with Ryan Tannehill, AJ Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry. So, Blake, what did you think? How did you think the Arizona Cardinals look? How good did their front four look? How good did Kyler Murray look?
Yeah, I mean, just starting on the defensive end, you would not have guessed that the Cardinals defense would have done this before. Obviously, you mentioned Chandler Jones at 3 sacks in the first quarter. 3 sacks in a game alone is nuts. 3 sacks in one quarter is even more crazy. Had a couple forced fumbles. And we've talked about it before, like, the potential of this front seven with Zaven Collins, Isaiah Simmons as the linebackers. You have Watt, Chandler Jones, Jordan Phillips. Like, you have a good group of guys, but I guess we were really underselling them because I personally did not think that this would be one of didn't think this was a possible result for for the Titans game. I mean, the Titans had top three offense last year. They had Derrick Henry. They were just going to run down people's throats. And then when you put 8 in the box, they have Julio and AJ Brown. Like this offense is going to be impossible to stop. And I I was of that same mindset too. Like how do you stop this Cardinals offense or this Titans offense? And apparently it's just have Chandler Jones, JJ Watt, and Jordan Phillips and just get crazy amounts of pressure on Tannehill when you need to. And that was just overall just something I didn't see playing out. And we'd mentioned it before too. The Cardinals cornerback situation is very iffy, not really too high on really to a lot of the guys in that cornerback room, but it doesn't matter when you're creating pressure with that many guys that quickly. Like I was just pretty surprised at that, but I guess what were your thoughts, Vish?
Yeah, more or less, I'm on the same boat. I mean, if you remember, we did the off-season NFC West rankings, and we caught a lot of strays, me, you, and Grant, for talking about this Cardinals front four and how good we expected it to be. People were like, no
Mhm.
way it can be better than Niners. They wrecked that football game. The Cardinals corners
Yeah.
aren't that good. I know Byron Murphy had a good game. I know we did not. I was not high on the set of Byron Murphy, Robert Alford, Malcolm Butler. I'm still not. But a lot of corners can look good. if your pass rush is dominating the game. J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones wrecked that game. Chandler Jones played like, Chandler Jones probably breaks the sack record this year, if we're being honest. With the 17th game and the number of times he's gotten to 19 and the number of times he's gotten to 20, there's a good chance he breaks the sack record this year. Their front four wrecked the game. Their front seven in general is very good. It's the type of front seven that can carry a team. Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons as their middle linebackers look good. This Arizona defense is serious. We know there's question marks with Cliff Kingsbury with this Arizona offense, but I think one thing I kept forgetting last year is we kept talking about Kyler Murray post the shoulder injury on his left shoulder and the issues he had throwing the ball over the middle of the field and the issues he had, sometimes making right decisions and processing. What we didn't talk about is that Kyler Murray was probably number 4 in terms of MVP candidates last year before that injury when Arizona was 6-3 behind Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Kyler Murray was probably the 4th guy. His MVP credibility was very real. And in a sense, I thought we saw MVP Kyler Murray yesterday. He was the best player on that field. I still think Cliff Kingsbury's offense is limited from the standpoint that it is so overly reliant on Kyler Murray. Everything is built around Kyler Murray's special ability to run and special ability to throw. The nice thing is Kyler Murray is capable of carrying an offense. He's done it since his rookie year. And once again, yesterday, him and DeAndre Hopkins looked unbelievable together. The back foot throw to Christian Kirk that he made the over and shoulder Jackie Robinson catch was silly. That was silly. The throw, it's just too good. The Cardinals, I still have question marks about them, but relative for them to go to Tennessee and make a statement like that in this division, I thought was big time because I think Tennessee is going to be a good team. I think Tennessee has a very good offense, and I think it'll look like a good offense late at some point this season. But Arizona absolutely went and destroyed it, and it's because of their pass rush. They have a special front four, and I think it's the least talked about elite position group in the NFL because that front four will dominate games.
I know we questioned J.J. Watt's health, but him being there along with Chandler Jones, like that 1-2 duo is insane. And then, I mean, I can't even imagine the blitzing factor, too, when you add in Zaven Collins, who is just an exceptional blitzer. Like, the dude's 6'4", incredibly fast. He's massive. Isaiah Simmons, also uber athletic, although I don't think he's as good of a blitzer as Collins.
But he's better in coverage.
Yes, he's much better in coverage because Collins is just a little bigger, maybe a little more flat-footed in coverage, you could say. But that 1-2 duo will be very interesting to track, especially when – a D line that commands a lot of guys getting doubled and those two are able to flow. Like those guys downhill you're not beating them laterally. Let's just put it that way because they're both really, really fast in a straight line. So I am very interested to see how they end up doing. And again, like this is the Titans offense. This was a top 5 offense in the NFL last year, and they made them look bad. They made them look horrible. Taylor Lewan came out after the game and said, "Thanks for the wake-up call, Chandler Jones, because I just got my butt kicked because you had 5 sacks. Like, that's very hard to do." And you're right. He probably will, break the sack record. I mean, obviously he won't get there, but he's on pace for 85 as of right now. So you never know what'll happen.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. I don't like getting carried away to week 1, and I think we've said a lot of things that are overly positive. We talked about Mac Jones, and I was overly positive. And, a lot could change in the next few weeks. But to me, Arizona's front four, unless one of those guys gets injured, how are you stopping that? Who's blocking them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That remains to be seen. And it's not like the Titans ran the ball particularly that well either. That was their bread and butter last year.
Destroyed that run game.
They couldn't really get much going there because that's usually, Titans are built off of we're going to run the ball, and then once you put it in the box, we have A.J. Brown and Julio Jones
the ball down
try
the
to
field.
stop that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was special stuff. And then Kyler Murray, of course, he looked like the MVP of the NFL. I mean, after one game, he probably had maybe the most special performance on Sunday with his legs and arm. I think overall, it just all looked good for Arizona. Maybe Tennessee is just not that good. That remains to be seen. I actually personally doubt that. I think Arizona is just good. I think their
Mhm.
defense is just good. I mean, we've done a few topics on Arizona this offseason. We've talked about their front four. We talked about how their defense is real talent. We don't know if Cliff can figure it out with their offense. But really, their offense does have more talent, I think, than we even accounted for. Chase Edmonds was pretty good, in my opinion, yesterday. That looked good for them as a run game in terms of as a complement to obviously Kyler Murray's special running. I thought the quartet of AJ Green, obviously DeAndre Hopkins, who was unreal.
Yeah, Steve
The
Miller.
quartet though with AJ Green, Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, that entire thing, I thought it looked pretty good, honestly. I thought it looked like, something like they're gonna have threatening receivers with all four of those guys. I thought that was also something else. So really overall, honestly, I was very, very encouraged by everything I saw with Arizona. And I was a Niners fan. I was discouraged because I didn't expect Arizona to come out and make a statement like that. They
Mhm.
wiped the floor with a good Tennessee team in Tennessee, or a team we think that's good, that has a lot of talented players, i.e., Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, Ryan Tannehill, Julio Jones, and they wiped the Rogers Stafford. They wiped the floor with them. But we'll see.
And I think Rondale Moore specifically, like I know Christian Kirk was like the second guy who kind of showed off for them. I feel like Rondale Moore was just built for this offense. Spread offense, just give him the ball in space. Watching him at Purdue is just a one-man wrecking crew. The guy single-handedly beat Ohio State while he was there. So I mean, I really think he'll be the number two guy eventually there, just because of how good he fits that offense with his yards after catch and all that. But man, I did not anticipate this, and we'll see what the Titans do to bounce back because this is kind of I'd say besides the Packers, and this was one of the biggest punches in the face any NFL team took in Week 1.
Yeah, I would say them, the Packers, and the Giants. Those were the three biggest punches in the face.
Giants was bad.
I was very high on Denver beating the Giants. I did not expect Denver to absolutely demolish the Giants. I thought the Giants defense would play better, especially at home. I thought that was a terrible performance. So yeah,
And the
definitely. But
Jaguars. Oh, the
true, true.
Jaguars. That I mean, no one like I think people were discounting how bad the Texans were, but also like people forget that the Jaguars were not that good last year either. And I know they got Trevor Lawrence, but man, that was rough. That was rough.
Yeah. So we've reached the end of our show, guys. Again, thank you so much for sticking with us. We appreciate all your support. Maybe we can take one question here before we go. I
Mhm.
know there was one question up here that we got to get to. Over under on Trey Lance's snaps in week 2, 9.5.
Mm. I would go with the under. I don't know
Me
how many
too.
he had week 1, but I feel like at least with how
He had
Jimmy
3 or 4.
he
3 or
had 3
4.
or 4. I mean, I'll just say this, like considering that Jimmy looked like 2019 Jimmy last year, I doubt they're just gonna be like, no, we're just gonna slowly have Trey Lance, 4 snaps, then 10 snaps, then 20. I feel like that'd be weird. Like if you want to just split them equally, like you're just gonna get the guy off the bench, put him in. Um,
Exactly.
I would go under, but you never know with Kyle Shanahan, especially the whole Trey Sermon thing too. That was just like seeing that
Weird,
news
right?
come out, like and Ayuk. The whole Ayuk thing, I mean, Sherfield has really, really impressed, I think, a lot of the Niners, beat reporters and just everyone in general. But like after Ayuk's rookie season when he looked like the second or third best rookie receiver, and now
Blake, you were told that by having Ayuk as your third best receiver, you're nuts. And you were told Ayuk was. I was also told that Ayuk is going to be the best. He's going to be a top 10 receiver in the NFL and everything this year. Seeing him not get a target, that was shocking.
I mean, I had him at 5 and I was getting yelled at, but I don't know.
You didn't have him at 5.
I had him at 5 on my rankings.
I thought you had him at 3.
No, I had him at 5 and everyone was saying he should be 3. You had him 3,
Oh,
I think. You had
I
him
had
3.
him 3.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. I had him 3. I had CeeDee
You
Lamb
had him
2 and
3, and
Justin
everyone was
Jefferson
yelling
1.
at me like T. Higgins is not better.
T
Juju,
Higgins. T Higgins is going to be unbelievable this season. T Higgins looks good.
CD Lamb looked pretty good. Justin
Yeah, he dropped a
Jefferson,
lot of passes though.
he
Yeah,
did drop a lot of
Jefferson.
passes.
Jefferson to me is already a top 15 receiver in the NFL. He's amazing.
Claypool's really good. There's a lot of guys.
Tony, we appreciate the support.
Thank you, Tony.
We know that you've been here since the beginning. We appreciate all your
Yep.
support. Bruce, thank you so much. I'm glad you look forward to it weekly. We look forward to providing you the best content we can. And honestly, guys, we appreciate all the support. We're 51 episodes deep. We're excited to dive into this NFL season with you. We will be back on Friday. We'll be back on Friday to do a little bit of just a question and answer. Maybe there'll be a couple of topics that'll come up during
Maybe
the week,
some rankings.
Injuries. Yeah, some rankings of what we saw. I mean, there will be a lot of things hopefully Game Pass makes available for us to be able to be a little more have a little more conviction on our rankings, i.e. the all 22. But overall, I'm glad that we were able to do this today, and I appreciate all of your support. Please like, share, and subscribe. Tell us what we got wrong. Tell us what we got right. But we will be back on Friday. There will be videos available. And real quick, I didn't watch Lawrence, so I don't know about this one. But
I can just say what I thought. I personally was like, all right, the O-line wasn't the best, but I would still say Zach Wilson's was probably worse. The receivers definitely dropped some catchable balls, like James Robinson specifically. He was out wide a lot, and I think he had a few drops. Other guys had a few drops. He had a couple of bad picks. One of them was unlucky, but I thought overall he was a little inaccurate, just like passes being high. You know, if it was to the outside, it'd either be low and away, or it's just general stuff like that. That like with Mac Jones, you just didn't see that. Like it was hitting him on the numbers. But Trevor Lawrence, I thought, were a little higher, and people would call them drops. But if the dude's fully extended, like it's kind of hard to pin that on the receiver. But he did, I will say, have a couple of just like corner and out routes, just like absolute strikes, a couple down the sideline that were great. And also, too, like I know Urban Meyer loves Laviska Shenault, but you cannot run 10 wide receiver screens to Laviska. Like there comes a point where it's just like you just can't keep doing that. And I don't know what's going to happen with Urban Meyer, but I just don't think he will last there very long. It just, I don't know. I did not like that.
I saw the touchdown he threw. That was an absolute strike. That was a beauty. But I mean, listening to what you said, it feels like he had quite comfortably the third best performance, because it feels like you watched all three. I think he had would it be fair for me to say that he had quite comfortably the third best performance between him, Lawrence, Wilson, and Jones?
I thought so personally. Like he definitely did a lot. Like there was times, I mean, like there were some absolute amazing throws. Like I don't think there was throws that Wilson and Mac Jones just wouldn't be able to make because it was to the outside in between the safety and the corner, and it was just a strike. And then there would be other times where it would just be like one of his first interception, he airmailed it over the receiver's head, and it was just a easy pick for Reed, and just other general stuff like that where it was like, this is like pretty concerning for the number one guy, like generally speaking.
I agree with you from that standpoint in the sense that I'm going to go back and watch this game. But
Please
in
do.
terms of his preseason, the shocking thing to me was that for a guy that's the next Andrew Luck, that's an Elway type prospect, the polish of him as a quarterback, especially given the very college offense he came from in Clemson that threw so many screens, I thought was less than Wilson and Jones in the preseason. And maybe even to some extent, I thought it was worse than Fields. Like, I thought Lawrence was the fourth best quarterback through the preseason. I thought Wilson was the best. Jones was Fields was second. Jones was third. That's how I would rank them. And then Lawrence fourth, just based on preseason. But I thought that I was shocked by how lacking he was at times in polish for a guy that's the next Andrew Luck or the next John Elway or Peyton Manning or that level prospect. You would expect, like, there are just aspects of his game that you would expect to be hammered down because he's played so much and he's been that guy for so long. So I'm shocked, also a little bit shocked to see that, that's still there and that still seems to be an issue even going into week 1. Of course, his support isn't great, like, that needs to be taken into account, but yeah.
But also, like, you're not playing the Texans every week either. Like, it
True.
doesn't get easier than theoretically playing this Texans roster.
Agreed.
But yeah, I mean, to
And
be fair
coaching
though,
staff.
Andrew Luck had a ton of a ton of turnovers in his first couple years. He was very turnover prone. So I don't know if it was always like these type of turnovers where it's like you're kind of concerned about him because like some of the throws were just like way too high in my opinion that where it became almost uncatchable at that point where you just didn't see that
Yeah.
with the other guys. Probably overreactionary. It is week 1, but that's just how I saw the first game that he played. And
I can't wait to go watch it. And real quick before we go, Matthew Mears, we appreciate you watching. We appreciate your support. I just wanted to put a rest to the Sermon and Ayuk being caught out late. That was a troll. Somebody put that out as a joke with like 7,000 followers, and then people just ran with it. There's no confirmation about that. The only credible thing we have gotten about Ayuk since the game and all this weirdness is Matt Mayoko said something about him as a professional and stuff like that, which
yeah,
is still odd because we haven't heard any issues with Ayuk prior to that. But otherwise, there's absolutely no information on what happened other than the fact that he walked into this game, he played a decent amount of snaps, and they didn't one time target him. Like, not even run a play to get Ayuk the ball, which was shocking because Kyle Shanahan loves to get his playmakers involved. I mean, go look at, I mentioned it earlier on Grant Show, and you probably saw it. Like, they schemed, when George Kittle, all 4 of his catches were schemed up plays to get George Kittle the ball. They weren't drop back situations, and Jimmy threw it to George Kittle. So when you look at it like that, and the fact that they didn't do anything for Ayuk, it makes you wonder. There's something a bit more going on here.
I did see like the he's still becoming a professional thing. Just an overall weird situation. Like, how is this sermon or the Ayuk information just like not known to anyone? I don't know. Kyle Shanahan is an interesting fella, as
Yeah,
some would say.
for sure, for sure. I mean, fantasy owners, he led them astray with Dante Pettis in 2019. Everybody thought Pettis was going to take over, and now fantasy owners thought this was the year of the Ayuk takeover. And
Mhm.
oh, okay, okay. You were just speculating. Yeah, I mean, it was a real rumor. Like, people were running with it. It was put out as for a fake guy. That's why I wanted to mention it. But overall, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an hour and 27 minutes. Again, we'll be back on Friday, most likely in the evening. Probably talking about the Thursday night game again. 51 episodes. Appreciate all your support. Please like, share, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts on how the Niners season is going to go, how the Rams looked, how the Cardinals looked, how Joe Burrow looked, why Aaron Rodgers didn't look that good, and why Blake's Packers are screwed. Anything, just comment down below. I know Blake's going to be bringing back that weekly Packers segment, so they'll probably break down
At
more
some
about
point,
why the
yeah.
Packers stink. Or later, I'm kidding when I say they stink, but they'll probably break that down a bit more a little bit later in the week. But again, thank you so much for all your support, and we will be back on Friday.